I am going to call the meeting to order. Welcome and introductions. I think we know each other. So is there a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Lori and Mike, any discussion?
Yes, I would like to suggest that we adjust the agenda when our guests get here. Did you give them a specific time?
I did it. If you look under communications with parents and citizens and staff, I told them to come at 6:30, and
Okay.
that's when they will be popping on.
And the other thing that I'd suggest is that, given the intensity of the agenda tonight, that we put off the Edmentum presentation and assessment.
May I comment on that?
You're
You've got-
in charge of the meeting.
You've got people who have already prepared to present to you tonight, and they're online.
Can I make a motion that we move it towards the end rather than the beginning?
Why?
Because I
Okay.
think there's more things that that are pressing to discuss. And I think by the time we get through a presentation, we've checked out, and I think when we go to discuss those matters, we're not giving it our best forward thinking.
So you may do whatever you'd like, because it's your agenda. I'm just letting you know that there are people prepared to present tonight. I would not want them to be hanging around until when that might be. So my preference is then let them go, rather than put it towards the end. That's my
I have a
preference.
Yes, the time definite.
Becky?
What is more important than that? That's on there. I see.
I would agree with you, Becky, because it looks like a lot, because it's talking about all the items on the superintendent's report, which we should have already read about. And the governance process part is already talking about vacancies and talking about the OV budget next steps, but I don't think that's gonna take a lot of time. And the consent agenda looks like a lot, but most of that is consent agenda.
Well, I'm going to second Bill's motion and add that there are things we need to discuss, such as the budget defeat, and I would like to discuss the situation with the the RNESU board as well, rather than just have a quick vote on new members.
So if I may, because I'm facilitating right now, because you
Yeah.
haven't yet elected a chair.
Yep.
So on this particular, you seconded the motion.
Yes.
So the motion is now seconded. Is there any further discussion on this motion, which the original motion was to table the Edmentum presentation to the next meeting? That's the motion. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Was it amended that we would go ahead with the presentation later on in the evening?
There wasn't enough.
It wasn't amended yet, it wasn't
I would
seconded.
amend it to do so.
Okay. So who was the second? Kevin?
yeah.
Do you agree with that amendment?
Sure.
Okay.
Can you repeat the amendment? I'm sorry.
So right now, the motion on the table for discussion is, who knew that I was going to be chairing this, is to postpone the Edmentum and SEL presentation until later in the meeting, time uncertain. And it was made and seconded, and Derek, your hand was up for comment.
Yes. I'm not really in favor of this motion, because we have invariably had discussions at the meetings about spending way too much time on process stuff and stuff that's not related to student performance. And where can we find information about what the current student performance is and that kind of thing. And so we have created an opportunity, and we've had a couple of them that have given us insights into what's really happening, which is the whole purpose of our work is to improve student performance.
Thank you. Natalie?
Padua? No.
Okay, Padua, Natalie, Padua, Barbara. Okay. Natalie?
I agree. We need to focus on student outcomes, as we learned in our training a couple weeks ago. And I also feel that it is disrespectful of people's time to make them hang on until the end in the hopes that there may be some leftover time for them. Either we postpone this to another time, or I think they should go right away.
Thank you. Natalie Padua?
I was just gonna say that I agree with that. I
That-
think that, yeah.
Yeah, can you speak a little louder?
I just was saying that I agree with Derek and Natalie. You should continue as planned.
Thank you. Barbara?
I agree with what Derek, Natalie, and Padua have said, that it would be immensely disrespectful for us to shift around the place on the agenda that the people who've joined us at our invitation have been scheduled for, or to put it off to a different meeting. And I echo that the student outcomes is our focus as a board. And so I don't think we should move it to another time.
I'll move the question.
Is there any, he
I
just-
had my
he
hand
just-
up
Question is
beforehand, though.
He just moved the question. Is there any, what do I do? Bill, help me out.
You have to vote on the question.
So we have to vote on
We can-
moving
We
the
can vote
question.
not to accept moving the question.
That's right. So the vote in front of you is whether or not to move the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, we are not moving the question, and so
I
Greg.
just had a quick thing. It looks like it's only 20 minutes long. Is that right? So it's not
Do you
super
think that's
long.
accurate, Kristen?
I definitely respect Bill's motion. I think that in general, it is about respect for the people that are here to do this now, but we also do need to be respectful of us as a board and our time, and that we try and save time in the beginning for us to have discussions so we don't get tired and not get to things. So I think in the future, if we could put things like presentations at the end, that would be my suggestion. But since they're here, I would say let's be respectful of their time.
Well, I was.
But I
Lori,
think
then
it's about
Eric?
respect everywhere.
Lori, then Eric, then Kevin.
So one of the things that I was going to talk about tonight was the fact that our second meeting, which was always based on facilities last year, is not necessary. So my suggestion is that we start moving presentations into that second meeting, because then they would be first on the agenda, and that would be really our only reason for being there. We could also still be continuing to talk about facilities, because we are waiting for the study about the land in Pittsford. But it would be a second meeting so that we could have these presentations and they don't take up time during our governance process meeting first of the month.
Thank you. I think I said Eric, then
Yeah.
Kevin. Thank you.
Just to throw the idea out there, if it's permissible, could items 5 and items 8 be moved to a different meeting?
So that would be I think that's a different, hold on to that. Let's finish this one, and then you can bring that up as a motion. I don't know what you mean by 5 and 80. Oh, I
She
see.
means
On the
the, she
agenda.
means
Roman numerals.
the training and the,
Board professional
board
development.
monitoring report.
Okay, all right, thanks,
Free up some time.
thanks. Kevin, you wanted to make another comment?
Yeah, certainly don't want to disrespect anybody who's here and prepared. And I actually agree with Derek, this is a very important topic. I think it deserves its own meeting, rather than a 20-minute report, because we know there's a crisis in our scores. There's a crisis in student behavior, there's a crisis in morale. These things really deserve a very thorough airing, rather than, we all have looking at our watches to make sure that we've got all this other stuff to do tonight. I don't mean any disrespect to their preparation or their presence at all, but I would really much rather prefer a meeting devoted to these issues, rather than trying to cram something into, a meeting that's very full otherwise.
Thank you. Bill?
Now that we've blown the time that was allocated for something else, one of the things that I had in mind was exactly along those lines, is this isn't enough time for this topic, and I would have loved to have seen some materials ahead of time to study them.
Didn't we get the materials at the training?
You actually did get the materials at the training.
Yes.
This topic, just to remind you, this topic is on here based on the work plan that the board did. That's why the topic is on here. So the board chose for it to be on tonight at their August retreat. And then you review the work plan at the end. So at the end of this meeting, you will review next month's work plan, so you have a chance to change it too, just informational only.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to review all the Edmentum stuff. I don't know if it's the same stuff, but
Isn't it?
it
Are
was,
there any other comments on the motion?
Becky has her hand up.
Becky? Thank you.
I was hoping we could call the question because we've now taken 12 minutes to discuss this, and it feels like every meeting we're having these kind of very tenuous conversations, and I would like us to focus on kids and student outcomes, and so I think most of our agenda does talk about that, and I would love to call the question so we can move on.
Okay, so once again, I ask if, please vote aye if you agree to call the question now.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
What's the question?
Calling the question. Could you raise your hand if you're an aye? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, sorry.
You're not an aye. Okay, 4,
And then people on
yes.
And then the people on,
screen too.
Oh, and then the people on the screen.
there's 3.
5, 6, okay, so we are calling the question. The numbers bear out. So all in favor of postponing the presentation until later in the meeting, please say aye and raise your hand.
All in favor of postponing?
Postponing the presentation to later in this meeting.
Aye.
1, 2, 3. All opposed to,
There's 4.
Later in this meeting.
yep.
Yep.
I don't see anyone online, okay. All opposed to postponing to later in the meeting, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we will follow the agenda for the presentation as planned. I would like to quickly move into the oath, or the election of a chair. However, are there any other agenda recommendations? You have one, Eric?
I had one as well.
Yes, just in the interest of saving time to make sure we got time for important stuff, is it possible that Articles 5 and 8, Roman numerals, could be moved to another time?
So there's a motion on the table to table 5 and 8 until, I assume, the next meeting. Is that
Correct.
fair to say?
Second.
And Mike seconds that. Is there any discussion on moving the items? Lori?
I'm fine with moving number 8. However, I think number 5 needs to have some time here tonight because it is talking about our training a couple of weeks ago, and there are some moving parts stemming out of that. So I really would not like to wait
Okay.
until next time.
Thank you. Natalie?
I agree 100%. We need to talk about number 5.
Okay. Any other comments?
We may talk about it more than 15 minutes.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, then calling the motion, if you agree to move items 5 and 8, and it may end up being another motion, but if you agree to move items 5 and 8 to the next meeting, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Natalie, your hand is up to move the items to the next meeting?
She's saying no.
Oh, no?
not both
2,
of them.
3. I need to have your hands up. You can't go up and down because I'm new at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Agreed to move. No one online. Okay, if you are opposed to moving 5 and 8 to the next agenda, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are we 5 and 5?
Yep.
You have no chair, so it fails because it's a tie. Is that correct? The motion fails because it's a tie, right?
Yeah, but you could still, as acting chair, you could vote or not vote.
I don't think I
The
can.
outcome is the same.
I don't
know
think,
if
I don't
she
feel
could
appropriate that I
vote,
could.
though. She's
We're-
not
I'm
a
just
member.
not. We'll
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
let's not discuss it. I'm just not voting. Did you want to amend your motion?
No.
Okay. Kevin, you said that you had something that you wanted to bring forward?
I changed my mind.
Okay. All right. So, all in favor of the agenda as amended? Please raise your hand, because we seem to have differences of opinions. 1, 2, 3. Are you an up
Hey,
or no?
how is it amended?
It wasn't amended.
Yes, oh, wait,
No,
yes,
In favor of
wait.
accepting it.
It's this,
Everything failed, right?
Right.
Yep, so we're.
Thank
Right.
you for catching me. So all in favor of the agenda as is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All opposed to the agenda as is. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and there's no abstentions because it adds up to 10. Okay,
You said 6 and 3.
She said 7 and 3.
don't vote me in as
Okay.
chair, guys. Okay, let's just say, I'm not going to be your chair, okay?
Is that even
Thank you,
allowed?
Kevin.
I wouldn't think so.
I don't think so.
No, this is, after 17 years of this is further than I've ever gone. Okay, so it is time to nominate a chair. I open the floor to nominations of a chair.
I nominate Lori Bertrand.
One nomination for Lori Bertrand. Becky? Oh, you don't, are you speaking, Becky?
Second. I'm second.
Second that?
Who seconded?
I- Becky,
Barbara.
Barbara.
Thank you.
Seconding.
Any other nominations for a chair? Okay, then Lori, you are chair by acclamation, and I hand the meeting over to you happily.
Not so sure I want it. All right, thank you for electing me chair. All right, so we're gonna move on to electing a vice chair. Are there nominations? I would nominate Derek Larson. If someone would second.
You don't need a second for
I
nomination.
don't think you do either.
Okay, that's fine.
But it looks like Becky was going to.
All right. Are there any other nominations for chair, or vice chair?
Move Derek by acclamation.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. Okay, we need to elect a, thank you. We need to elect a clerk. Nominations? Currently, our clerk is Barbara.
I'll nominate Barbara.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Natalie, did you want to?
Okay, any other
I was
nominations?
gonna say Barbara.
Okay. Any other nominations? Hearing none, then by acclamation, we will nominate, or we will accept Barbara as our new clerk, or continue as clerk. Okay, we need to appoint 3 members of our board to the RNESU board. I would accept nominations at this point.
I nominate Mike Lufkin.
Okay. Other nominations, Barbara?
I
I nominate Lori Bertrand.
Becky, that was Becky.
Okay. And Barbara, who are you gonna,
That's who I was gonna nominate.
okay.
Who's on it now?
The 3 people on it right now are Becky, Barbara, and myself. Natalie,
Nominate Barbara.
all right. Any other
I
nominations?
thought Barbara was already nominated.
Barbara's already in there.
That's why I said
I have,
Barbara is nominated, Mike is nominated, Lori is nominated.
Yeah.
And you can nominate as many as you want,
Right.
and we can have a runoff.
exactly.
You can nominate all of you if you want.
Yep. No others?
Move nomination seized.
Okay. Okay. Well, it doesn't look like we need to vote then, since it looks like we only have 3 members. So, congratulations, Mike and Barbara and myself. Okay. We need to appoint a Stafford Tech Center Advisory Board rep. That was Barry in the past. Can you explain what he did?
Sure, the Stafford Advisory Board, Tech Center Advisory Board meets once a month on a Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock and 8 a.m. And you, along with
Stafford or?
at Stafford, and you would represent the Otter Valley Unified Union School District Board in that meeting. You also might be asked to serve on a committee which varies by times. They have a finance committee, and I don't remember the other 2. And we are supposed to send a rep. Barry has been doing it for you for the last couple of years. Marcia, Bruce, rather than me, I sent Marcia and Bruce in my place. I don't know what Kristen will do, but there's supposed to be a board member.
How long do the meetings typically take?
I believe an hour, 90 minutes at the most, but I believe an hour. Once a month.
And
Still serve good food.
I don't know, yes. I believe they do. I believe they take good care of you. It's right up your alley, Kevin.
So we need to nominate somebody? Or-
Yes.
Yes, you
I
need
would
to
nominate Kevin.
Would you?
I would.
Will you accept?
If he wants to do it.
Accept.
Would you?
Yes,
If he will accept that.
I would love to do it myself if I had the time, but
Well, if Kevin doesn't, then I'll renominate Derek.
Do you have the time?
what's that?
Do you have the time?
I work 60-some-odd hours a week.
Okay.
You accept the nomination?
Sure. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, any other nominations? Hearing none. Kevin, congratulations, you're the new Stafford Tech Center Advisory Board rep. Okay, communications with parents, citizens, and staff. Is there anybody here or on the call that is, wants to talk to us prior to us getting into the meeting? Nope, okay. We are gonna have our legislative reps join us in about 7 minutes, but we can start with a consent agenda. I do need to pull off item J.
Okay, first you need a motion to accept the consent agenda, then you have people pull things off.
Is that how that
Ideally,
works?
yeah.
All right, fine.
Just like a
Anybody wanna-
regular.
Okay,
I'll make the motion to accept the consent. agenda.
okay,
Second.
all right, and I would like to remove J.
Okay.
Any, okay.
Can I remove I?
You wanna remove I? Okay,
And those are amendments to the,
not right now. Sorry, no,
You need to be executive session.
yeah. Not in 8 minutes, I don't think, based on
Lori?
what's been going on so far. Yeah.
Becky's trying to raise her hand.
Becky, sorry. Oh,
Becky, you froze.
You froze.
And there you
Can
go.
you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
I don't know where it is, but I would like to pull off, the board member, how many board members to sign.
Oh, yep. G, okay. Okay,
So I'll just come back on, just let me know when.
I'll text you.
that's perfect, okay. All right, so pulling off J, I, and G, I, and J. All of those in favor of the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, consent agenda passes. We can start with the first one, board members to sign orders. So I need a motion to accept, and then we can talk about it. Do you wanna make a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Becky.
Second.
Second from Mike. Okay, so, Becky, since you brought it up, do you wanna talk about it first?
Sure, there's, at Rutland Northeast, we don't need 2 signatures. And I noticed that it's like pulling teeth to get 2 of us to go do that, and so I was thinking it would make sense for one of us, and then, one person, like we do it for Rutland Northeast.
Actually, Rutland
Instead of us.
Northeast actually does have 2 signatures. You appointed the superintendent and the assistant
Right.
to the curriculum office. So it's 2 staff signatures.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about, that one board signature and then one Rutland Northeast.
Staff.
Okay, other discussion? Bill?
Yes, besides Barbara and myself and Derek, we'd be out of a job without, if you did away with it. But the thing is I don't think that it's an effective control mechanism. I would like to come back to control, financial controls at a later meeting. But right now, the current system, I don't think is very effective in doing the oversight that we would like.
Okay, so do you have a suggestion?
Well, the law allows the superintendent to do this, I do believe. And this was suggested before, and I actually was on the other side of that issue, but I've come to a different point of view. And I'd be content with the superintendent doing that. And I would also hope that we would spend some time on the audit at a different meeting.
Okay, so are you going with what Becky's talking about, which is have one board member sign and then the superintendent take care of the rest, or just the superintendent?
Just the superintendent.
Okay, other discussion? Kevin?
I'm one of the people who never signs, and that's not out of inertia. It's a deliberate decision. And this goes back to my previous service on the old Otter Valley High School board. Felt like it was my duty to go, do this once in a while, take my turns, and I would. And I always left with the feeling that I had no idea what was going on or what I had signed off on, or, if I had just allowed somebody to steal $20,000, because I just couldn't keep track of it. So the reason I don't sign anymore is because I don't want to have that feeling anymore. And so I would heartily agree that the system as it is really is not an effective oversight. Not demeaning anybody who does the signing, but certainly if I were taking my turn again, I would not have a clue what's happening financially. So I do think we need some kind of reform in how this is done. I agree with Bill.
Hey, Derek?
As someone who has been one of the diligent ones that's gone up there and reviewed the material twice a month, I've found it to be an education. I've found that I have developed clues about what it's all about. I have found things that I raised questions about that ultimately were changed in some practices, and I think it would be a really great education for all the board members to take their turn to go through the material and see what it is that we're buying with all the taxpayers' money. Because if you don't do that activity, you end up sitting here at a board meeting wondering, where's all this money being spent, and that cry goes out into the community, or the cry comes from the community to us. And if you have the experience of looking through these materials, you'll be much better prepared to have discussions with folks about it, and also be able to help, not so much checking whether somebody's stealing $20,000, because over time, as you look at these things, you can pick out something like that. But it would be more to the point of understanding what's going on in the district, and I think it's a valuable tool.
Well, I'll stand corrected. You're obviously a faster learner than I am, at least with financial matters.
I don't know about that, but I put my hours in.
Mike?
I can agree 100% with Derek's saying, but the issue I have is the hours when the
Offices
are open are 9 to 4 typically.
Right.
I can't get there during that time frame, and if I was to get there during that time frame, I'd be rushing through to get it done, not just taking my time and going through it. So that's one of the reasons why I'm never there to, sign them or review them.
Yeah, I'm not casting aspersions on anybody. I'd just be encouraging.
No, and I agree. I think it's an effective tool for us to review. It's just lack of time on my part.
Eric?
I've made it up a few times when I can, but, I work a lot and I have a staff working for me, and it's tough just to up and take off. But when I was on the Pittsburgh board years ago, before it was all unified, the orders were done at the meeting. They were passed around, and we would have a few minutes during the meeting to say, I have a question on this, I have a question on that, and it did happen.
That's a good idea.
And it worked, I thought, flawlessly.
It did not. It's a
There's
huge.
a lot of material there. I wouldn't
Pittsburgh
want to
board was very small.
spend that much
very small
time
amount.
passing
We
it
only had a
around.
few members.
How long does it take you to review, Derek?
It depends on the day. Some day, I don't know the cycle exactly, but there's one day of the month where there's a significantly larger stack of papers, but there's a summary sheet. You can read through the numbers pretty quickly, and I have my own strategy for saying, I want to look at this one, I want to look at this one, I want to look at this one. I don't look at every single one, but, the last one was that there were 2 pesticide people working in different schools, so I just said, hey, I noticed that. Can you consolidate that or something?
And they did.
And they did.
Okay, Barbara?
I was actually wondering about what Eric mentioned, whether it would be at all feasible to bring the orders to a board meeting and just to the people who got there early could review the orders. I mean, I know it's a big stack. It's just throwing out a possible suggestion. I don't know if it would help, but.
I'd like to,
Can I just ask,
No, she's not
what,
done.
what Derek is saying, that I wish I could actually get there more often to sign them, because I find it very illuminating to know, what we buy as a district.
Okay, go ahead.
So a couple of things. First, we run orders twice a month. That doesn't necessarily align with when the board meeting is, because our vendors are expecting it certain days, not first Wednesday for that kind of thing. So that won't necessarily solve the problem. When I first became superintendent, the Otter Valley Board had me bring them to the Otter Valley Board. It was a large packet, and nobody did turn up early to sign them. And so it meant that during the meeting, board members were kind of leafing through it and listening at the same time. And you can't do both. If you're going to review them, review them. I don't think the superintendent wants to stay after with a board member till 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock to review them. I can say that only because it won't be me. Now that it's all of Otter Valley, what Eric described, the amount of money that Pittsford spent was a whole lot smaller than the amount of money of the Otter Valley Board. Now that's smaller than the amount of money of all of Otter Valley UUSD. So for the superintendent to bring it back and forth to the meetings, I don't feel is practical. Plus, remember, it's twice a month. I'm not sure it'll solve the problem.
Okay, any other discussion?
Review what item G says, please.
Yep, so the motion on the table, I believe, did Becky make a motion,
Becky
actually?
and Mike, yep.
Becky and Mike made a
No,
motion.
Yeah,
The-
Mike did not.
Did he
seconded
second
it.
it?
I
Yeah, he
seconded
seconded it. So the motion on the table is that one board member sign orders, and then the superintendent and staff member?
Or one, and
Or-
one's- you
right,
would,
and
you
one
would,
other staff member.
you would designate who the
Right.
staff member is.
Okay.
Can
Would
I ask
also
a
sign.
quick question to Derek? Are you recommending that we vote against it based on your statement?
I would just assume the superintendent do it, but I do commend Derek for his labor in this. I go in after him, and yeah, he's gone through them, but I'm not going to vote for the motion.
No, I think we've had enough discussion about it. It's fine. I mean, you don't like stacks of paper going through this kind of stuff. I mean, we send that out every meeting for 67 pages for, our meeting. And you don't need necessarily to have everybody deal with this. Somebody should, and for an accountability piece, have other eye. We need to do our due diligence, and there ought to be other eyes looking at stuff once in a while, so.
And to be completely honest, usually getting one person is feasible. It's the second one. So, I'm gonna call the question, and can I do that?
No, but.
Or can I at least
works.
say we're moving on? We're moving on, and, we're gonna vote. So all of those in favor of just one board member signing orders and, the superintendent and her staff, or designating a superintendent and a staff member to also sign, please
yeah.
signify by saying aye.
I'm confused. You're doing a board member and somebody on the staff. Could you designate who it is?
Who's the one at our NESU?
It's both the superintendent, and it's Jess Morse Davis, the admin assistant for curriculum. Personally, I kind of like the idea of it being a staff member and not the superintendent themselves, just because of that extra set of checks and balances.
Sure.
So Jess, maybe?
So Jess, is everybody okay with that? Everybody okay with that? Okay, so, I'm gonna say it again. The, one board member and the admin assistant to the director of CIA would be signing orders. All of those in favor? Please raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, really? Okay, I thought I was gonna be contentious. Perfect. All right,
Three
then, we got
yes
it.
on one.
No, we're all good. Okay. So now at this time, it is 6:37, and I see that we have we did have two.
Peter and Stephanie.
Stephanie.
We're both there.
Oh, there she is. Okay. So hello, Peter and Stephanie. Online, you'll see Peter Conlon, who is legislator, and he's also a board member in the Addison County, or Addison Central School District, and he's on the Ed Committee up at the legislature. And everyone knows Steph Jerome. She's our legislator here from Brandon and Sudbury and Pittsford. So thank you both for coming. So I was hoping that you guys could give us kind of an overview of what's going on up there, and give our board members a chance to ask questions, if that's okay.
Sure. So,
Go ahead, Steph.
I was just going to introduce you, Peter, as the. I'll start. I'm Stephanie Jerome, and I'm on the Commerce Committee, and I'm the ranking member of the Commerce Committee, and represent Brandon, Pittsford, and Sudbury. And I have a few points to make about a bill that we're working on in Commerce that addresses career and technical education issues. But Peter is the Vice Chair of Education Committee, and he's been front and center on all issues pertaining to education in the State House. So, Lori, who would you like to start?
Oh, either one of you.
Coming any minute now, too.
Either one.
Steph, I'm happy to go ahead if that'd be easier.
Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah, you've got the one.
So, good evening, everybody. I'm Peter Conlon of Cornwall. Within your district, I represent Leicester and Goshen, and then 4 other small Addison County towns up in the Addison Central School District. Oh, and Hancock, for that matter. And I was taking note of your discussion that you were just having, because we had a very similar discussion Monday night at our school board meeting. So just so you know, 2 board members, but they can just review the summary sheet if that's what they want to do.
Okay.
Anyway, so this year, where we are right now is we're kind of at this major halfway point where bills that originate in the House have to get over to the Senate and vice versa. And so, we don't know the future of any bill because it all depends on what the other body does with it. That being said, at the start of this year, the House Education Committee, which I'm on, we were kind of pled with by both the Agency of Education, the School Boards Association, Superintendents Association, to not enact any great new initiatives. And we have done our best to respect that. A couple of things that are going on that I'll just tell you about because they will have a direct impact. In the continuing implementation of Act 173, which is the special education funding bill, we are essentially updating it in a way that will hopefully put a little more money into the system. As some of you may know, FY23 is the first year where your special education money will be based on the average of your spending in FY 18, 19, and 20. What we're doing is we're bumping that up a year to FY 19, 20, and 21, assuming that in most cases that's a higher number. If it isn't, a school district will get its choice of the higher number. This is going to pump about another $4, $5, $6 million into the special ed funding system. This is really just in a way to recognize that special ed costs have been going up a little bit more than anticipated, that the transition to the census block funding under 173 is a little more challenging given the pandemic and a lot of other things. So that's one bill that is making its way through, and it's, regardless of how it comes out, it's going to have a financial positive impact on all school districts. Another bill that came from the Senate that is in our committee right now is a universal meals program. Obviously, the idea here is to try to be able to continue what the federal government has been funding during the pandemic, providing both breakfast and lunch at no cost to students, and currently at no cost to the state. That ends at the end of this school year. We'd like to see it keep going, but cumulatively across the state, we've had numbers ranging from $25 to $40 million as a cost. So I'm not sure we're ready to move forward with it like that. We might just have it be a breakfast-only program, or take a bigger swipe at it with a funding source that isn't it isn't property tax dollars. And isn't sort of coming out of the ed fund, so it has to be replaced by ed fund dollars. So that's another big discussion that's going on right now. The other major thing that the House Education Committee is wrapping up work on is a rewrite of Chapter 11 of the state statutes in Title 16. Chapter 11 is essentially the chapter that governs the exploration, formation, and creation of union school districts. It hasn't been updated since 1967. There's been a lot of stuff kind of plugged into the statutes here and there on it. And then, of course, so much of Vermont went through Act 46 that a lot of lessons were learned. Most of this rewrite is just taking current law, making it clearer, adding a lot of detail, and putting it in an order that is much more user-friendly. It seems, you might think, well, we just did all these mergers and now you're rewriting it. Well, the answer to that is yes. But in fact, there are still merger discussions being talked about or actually going on. Virgins and Mount Abe are currently involved in a formal study committee looking at forming a merger. So anyway, that is up on the floor tomorrow. Probably the biggest part of that is new and has a lot of kind of heavy duty policy in it is withdrawals from a unified union school district and how to handle those. It's rather in depth. It basically makes clear that the State Board of Education cannot stop a withdrawal, but it puts a lot of the footwork that has to go into it up front to help improve transparency, accountability, and really providing voters as much information as possible before a withdrawal vote would take place. We've got some stuff coming over from the Senate that we're going to deal with. One is a bill that would require the AOE to come up with a mandatory policy governing school mascots, and essentially saying that all school boards would have to adopt a policy saying that your mascot is not offensive in a clearly defined way that will be in the model policy. And then a much more sort of complicated matter legally is the whole issue of tuition dollars in towns that pay tuition, whether or not those tuition dollars can go to approved independent schools that are also religious schools. And that has not landed in our committee yet. I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I'll speak to it as best I can if there are questions. Anyway, that's what I have at the moment. There are some smaller things out there, but perhaps a little less consequential.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Peter at this time, or would you rather hear Steph talk first?
I have numerous questions for Peter, but it's better to have Steph talk first.
Okay. So, Stephanie, go ahead. And Butch. Hi, Butch.
Butch is joining me on my screen, and
Oh, you froze.
Thanks to Kevin Thornton, I was invited to join up with the field trip that the history of technology class and the chemistry class took to UVM's Discovery Hall in the physics department to look at the reproduction of the of Thomas Davenport.
Oh, just a sec.
Just
Kevin,
mute.
could you turn off not just the...
Sorry, yeah.
And your computer too, it has to be two places.
Got it.
Thanks.
I was trying to see people better, but that didn't work.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You can
I
stay
wanted
on,
to-
just have to mute.
It was an absolutely fascinating day. It was the physics department and the lecturers did an amazing job of engaging the students, and we did electricity and magnetism experiments, and then had the unveiling of the reproduction of the historically accurate reproduction of Davenport's engine, and then to sort of tie it all together, Beta Technologies was there, a new company, maybe 3 years old, which has grown leaps and bounds in Vermont, and it showed how they're producing electric helicopters using the electric and using an electric engine, and I thought it was a phenomenal day, and I hope the students got nearly as more out of it than I even got. But I just thought it was a wonderful opportunity to hands-on learning. So to segue into the next thing that my committee, the Commerce Committee, has sort of tangential purview over career and technical education, more on the adult side. But we are looking at, we're producing a workforce development bill, which is, the governor has been a huge effort with one of the governor's major policy pieces for this legislative session. And we're looking at career technical education funding and governance. And there's as you know, this is a sort of a problem because the funding, the money follows the kids. So it isn't a really fair and equitable way to do this for the sending schools. And so there'll be a report coming out in next July. We'll be examining all of that sort of funding and governance model, and we'll see what if anything sort of comes out of that. So that's been one piece. Another piece that we've been looking at is getting more kids into the workforce, but through internships. And then there's some money in this bill for paid internships. So if a student's interested in dentistry, maybe they could intern at a dental office, or if someone's interested in being an engineer, they could be an intern at an engineering office, or if they're interested in more of a career and technical field, they could maybe do a 6 or 12-week internship. So more opportunities for students to get into the workplace and into the field. And then one of the last things I think is pretty innovative, and it's a 2-year pilot. We're creating a revolving loan fund for career technical education centers like Stafford or Hannaford that have a building trades program. And the revolving loan fund is to buy blighted properties in the community near the technical center that the students could use that property to learn their skills. They're, all building trade skills, plumbing, electrical, carpentry, and heavy machinery operating, all the things that they do in the Career and Technical Center to rehab a building. Then on top of that, there's money so that the students can work after school or weekends or summertime to complete that project so that they're paid for their extra work that they're doing. And the committee believes that, if students work, they should be paid. So that's going to be I think it's a pilot program. I'm hoping it's going to be a 2-year pilot, sort of get off the ground and get it going. And we'll see if there's been an interest in the career technical centers to do that sort of hands-on building trades work, and meanwhile fixing up properties in our communities that can then be sold. And when they get sold, that money will go back into a revolving loan fund, and we can then they can invest for another project. So it's interesting, sort of innovative stuff, and I'm hoping it moves forward and we can get more students well trained and into the workforce.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. But I'll turn it over to Butch now.
Okay.
Are you all set, Lori?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. And I've been moved to Transportation Committee, so my job has changed after quite a while, a long time up here, and that's been great. But I got to tell you, I'm really interested in hearing from the omnibus ed bill we're going to hear from that Representative Conlon talked about. There's a lot of really good stuff in that, and I don't want to comment too much on it right now because it hasn't passed the House, but I think we'll be talking again after. Once need more schooling on it from Representative Conlon. I want to talk a little bit about the e-bus project that's going on. You may or may not be aware that Fairfax has received 2 electrically powered school buses. They just put the first one into service as a pilot program. I think it's a 2-year pilot. The first one, they received 2. One was ready for the road. One had an issue, not electrical, but a mechanical issue on the bus that they're getting repaired. So we're looking forward to seeing what's happening with that, because there may be some new funding coming in regards to electrifying the transportation sector. And within that new money that's coming in, and we hope is coming in, if the federal government finally passes a real budget, we'll be very happy about that. And within that budget, there's specifically an e-bus program, and it'll be a grant program. The question that we have not solved yet, because we don't have all the guidance on that, is it going to be, will it be just for public schools that run their own bus system, like you folks do, or will it be opened up to other schools that hire private contractors? And that's an open question that we don't know about yet. So, but I would say that if you're interested in being a part of that pilot program, stay tuned. And if anything happens with it before we leave the building, in May, I'll certainly make sure the board knows about it. But I think it's obviously the wave of the future, but it's got a long way to go in the pilot. And Fairfax is chosen because of the topography of the town, similar to most Vermont's towns. So we want to take a really good look at that first. And that's my world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So
I have a question for Peter. Peter, did you mention the retired teachers bill that we passed in the House that would be allow teachers who are retired to come back into the workforce without a
I didn't. I forgot about it. It didn't originate in our committee. But that bill is just passed the House. Seems to be on an easy track forward, and it would allow retired educators, so not just teachers but administrators as well, to come out of retirement, work without it penalizing their pension. Right now there's a sort of a disincentive for retired folks to come back in, because once they earn a certain amount, they can't earn any more without it just being a dollar for dollar wash with their pension. So this is long overdue. We should have done this years ago. Anyway, this will hopefully help alleviate some of the shortage of educators in our system.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay.
So, Lori, just
Yes.
so you know, and Peter probably obviously because he's the guy. The task force report on funding of schools in Vermont is actually in bill form now over in the Senate. Haven't seen it yet. Peter, have you seen that at all yet, or just?
No, I haven't. And I think Butch is referring to the pupil weighting factors, the pupil weighting bill, we'll just call it. It's going to potentially rejigger how we divide the pie of equalized pupils in Vermont and change the weights that each student is assigned. And I apologize for not having brought that up at the beginning either. That bill started in the Senate, remains in the Senate, but is really the culmination of the work of a task force that I was on this summer and fall, and sort of builds on a report that the legislature commissioned looking at the weights that we use for students, whether they are secondary or from a disadvantaged background or English language learners, that sort of thing. And that has the potential to have a rather large impact across the state. I don't have the spreadsheets in front of me to know how sort of one district does versus another, but it will basically take that pie that we call the Ed Fund and divide it up differently based on equalized pupils.
Great. So before I open it up to questions, and I want everyone to be aware that it is 6:55, and we did talk about time when we started. Would it be possible that you might come back to our April 20th meeting, although we may move it because that's during break, so that we could really get up in your grill and ask all sorts of questions?
It'd be great. Love the opportunity to come.
So if that's okay with the rest of everyone here, I realize that it's putting it off a little bit, but
I'm not going to be here that week. I'm making a research trip, and so there are some questions I would like to ask tonight.
well, we also are talking about moving the meeting from April 20th anyway, because it is April break, so we could move it either up a week or down a week.
Don't forget.
I'd still like to strike while the iron is hot a little bit. Just, I know that, one of the reasons, to go back to the earlier discussions, that we wanted to perhaps not do as much tonight, so we'd have more time for discussion, which is an incredibly important function of our boards. and we've got them here, as we had the people who are going to be presenting on testing. And it seems unfortunate if we don't take advantage of the presence of the legislators.
How does everyone else feel?
Given the importance of the issues, some of these things are very important, and they will not rest for a month because too much is happening, deals are being struck. We've just dealt with crossover, and the weighting study, for example, can have a huge effect in terms of the monies that are being received, how students are counted, and so forth. The only thing I've seen in the media doesn't give what the weights would be or what the implications are. I haven't seen a draft of the bill. I've looked on the website and haven't seen it. But this is something that deserves a great deal of time. 219 of the Senate, which would open the door for religious schools to get public tuition money. We haven't really talked about that, and for an issue of that importance, of that much significance, I don't think we should shortchange it.
Natalie?
One other thing is money following the child. Look out, look out, look out. That's a setup for choice, which begins to set up socioeconomic segregation in the schools, and you just don't ignore an issue like that.
Okay, Natalie?
I agree. I believe that these are all really important issues, but is it necessary for us to talk about the questions that you have? Will it result in action items that we have to do tonight? So
that's why I made
whatever
the
the information, the questions you ask, will that result in information that will help us decide on an action item tonight? So our time is limited and we need to prioritize what we need to do. So maybe we do wait 2-3 weeks to come back with the questions, knowing where it's going to lead us. I just feel like we need to move forward with solutions and action items right now and not just information gathering.
Well, the legislature has their own timetable, and the questions I want to ask, which are probably a disguised form of lobbying in at least one way, are potentially going to affect that legislation. So to delay is, there's some Martin Luther King quote about delaying is destroying or something, but it doesn't come to mind. But the iron is hot. We should strike while the iron is hot.
I'm seeing Stephanie raising her hand.
Sure. I just feel like if you'd like to give us some comments about some of these topics, it is timely, and I think it'd be helpful to us to hear what your opinions are, or if you have comments for us. It is a very important time in the legislative session. And I don't know your time frame. I don't know how long you can stay on, but I'm willing to stay for a few extra minutes if you would like to speak with us. I think Butch had agreed the same thing.
Can we email your comments? Are there things that we can do that's more efficient than with the limited time we have?
I would, since
Giving
I've got an
input.
appointment
That's
on
the whole
education
thing.
topics
We could have
here,
asked
I would
3-4 questions by now, but we're
just
giving
if
input.
anybody's welcome to email me anytime, I'd be happy to answer any questions that come in via email.
Okay, so you can ask one of your questions, Kevin, and see.
How about setting up a separate meeting for the people who are interested in a smaller format for a longer length of time?
Well, we could do this at our next meeting in 2 weeks.
It's 3 because
Or it's 3? Is it 3?
So Stephanie's right.
Yeah.
They need to hear your comments now. What if we just went around and did one person?
Okay, so comments to everyone, starting with Greg.
I deferred my extra comment to Kevin because I don't have any specific ones.
Okay.
Thanks. My first questions or comment is to Stephanie, and we can sit down and have a longer discussion about this. I think the bill about technical education is extremely important, and I would caution you not to be solely focused on the tech centers. At Otter Valley, for example, we have kids who are not on that pathway, numerous kids who are not on that pathway, who desire technical education. Sometimes they weren't mature enough to apply, sometimes their grades aren't good enough, sometimes they haven't figured out what they wanted yet. Sometimes the programs don't match what they want, but they are deeply in need of technical education and deeply desire it, and we don't have the money for it. I was talking to our tech teacher yesterday about the vacuum system in the shop. That dates back to the beginnings of the school in 1961. It's the holes in it are covered with duct tape. It's dangerous today. So the funding for that sort of thing, if all the money goes to the CTE centers, it won't help our kids here at all. So the pathways, I think, are very important.
Yeah, I'm glad to answer that too, Kevin. So I'm an advocate for that. I spoke to, I've spoken to Devin Karpak extensively. I've recently spoken with the director of Stafford. 265 kids who apply to a Stafford program do not get in because it's so fully enrolled. And of those, 100 of them are absolutely qualified to be enrolled. So it is harmful to our kids who can't get into those programs. And I am a true believer that if we can give kids some skills in the school, some technical education skills in the school, it's only one step better for them when they graduate, if they're not planning on going to college or military or another postgraduate institution. So I am a believer in it, that there is a disconnect with the Department of Education, but just let you know that when they speak about it in my committee, I am talking about making sure that we can have those programs in our schools. And it seems to me like awful lot of high schools in the state have small tech ed programs in one fashion or another that they are including in the schools, the coursework offered to students.
Yeah, and just one more thing. Devin's entire Rowland Fellowship is devoted to studying this question. That's what he wants to do, is produce a report on the best pathways or multiple pathways for kids who are interested in tech ed. So I think he'd be a wonderful person to talk to in depth and maybe testify.
Sure. I mean, statewide, they say there's 3,000 kids who graduate from high school with no clear plan once they walk off that campus. So we need to get those kids some skills, and if we can, and I think this is one way to do it. So I'm all with you.
Thank you.
Kevin, could I have Devin's last name?
Karpak, Karpak.
And I need to also thank Devin for including me in that field trip to UVM. Devin and Kevin were wonderful and inspirational teachers to those kids.
Thanks, and we really appreciate you. Not only were you there, but you spent at least, 2.5 hours, something like that, so really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I have a question for Peter as well. It's one that we don't have time for a thorough discussion, unfortunately, but is a huge issue in this district. We talk about equity a lot, but we have an enormous issue with inequitable representation on our board. And by that I mean the RNESU board. I think it violates Buckley v. Hoff. In 1964, when Vermont's House was redistributed, the court found, and I'm quoting here, that citizens of the state's larger communities are invidiously discriminated against because of the inequality of representation. That absolutely applies in our district. The Barstow district, which has a total population under the total population of Pittsford alone, has equal weight on our board. I think this is crying out for reform. I think it's crying out for a lawsuit, frankly, and the legislature has to do something about this because our voters are being inequitably underrepresented by this really terrible law.
I'm really glad you asked that question because it may come up on the floor tomorrow when I'm presenting our big bill. One of the parts of the Chapter 11 rewrite that is new is that a board can, or the state board of its own, a board can petition, or the state board on its own can adjust representation on a supervisory union board if one of the members of the supervisory union board is a unified union school district. I guess you're a perfect example. One of your members is a unified union school district with Otter Valley. And the idea here is in fact to address exactly the issue you're talking about, sort of the cases where you might have a very large unified union school district and a very small side-by-side, but under sort of the current rules of creating supervisory unions, each one gets 3 members.
That's exactly our situation.
Seeks to allow that to be adjusted either at the state board's own discretion or at the request of the supervisory union.
With the current makeup of our supervisory union, we're unlikely to get them to request it because it's against the interests of the smaller body to agree. So it's likely to end in a 3-3 vote if, at best.
Well, I can't comment on the politics of the state board. I can just
Sure.
tell you that it is certainly an option that's available.
So what's the other path, and how can we begin heading in that direction?
Well, there are just 2 paths. I mean, the state board has to make the decision. And so it's either they do it on their own. And so if you want to look north at our district, if the state board were to decide, ACSD, we're going to turn you into an SU so that you can provide SU services to Ripton, thereby creating an SU made up of ACSD and Ripton. The state board, if they were to go that route, they could on their own say, and we're going to adjust your SU representation because we feel the standard 3-3 is inequitable. So they can do it on their own, or you can request that they adjust yours.
Is there any way to prod them to do it on their own if the board itself does not request it?
I see what you're saying. I don't know the answer to that, but I assume they're a public body that is welcome to take comments.
I might suggest this is a legal question rather than a Peter question, and we
Sure.
could get a legal opinion on it.
Happy to bow out of legal questions.
It's actually an RNESU issue, but we can get a legal opinion on it. We'd got one actually shortly after the merger, but we can follow up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, did you have any questions?
I'm good. Answered it on the technical stuff.
Padra, did you have any
I don't.
questions? Derek?
No, I'm going to pass. Thank you for your information.
Bill?
Well, I don't know if I want to get started at this hour. I think I'd rather talk with you folks individually.
Okay.
You know how to find us.
After you do the others.
Okay. Mike?
I'll pass.
Becky? No? Natalie? Barbara?
Thank you for taking the time.
And you said you had a question?
I would like just to make a comment again, and Butch, I don't know if you found the answer to this yet, but this affects this board. The Otter Valley Board budget failed. We're gonna have a discussion about that later tonight. Only 900 people showed up to vote. And it appears to be a direct correlation to the fact that our 2 largest towns mailed ballots, and the 4 small towns did not mail ballots. And many people have commented that they didn't even realize they didn't vote on the school budget because we were not allowed to mail ballots. As we go back out, I'll be talking to the board later tonight that you're going to be facing the same issue. If you want to wait for your select boards to give you approval to mail, first you need all 6 boards to agree, and it's going to take us a month to get those answers, which will delay your vote significantly. So I think that this is old. It needs to be fixed. It should have been fixed with Act 46 and wasn't. Select boards should not be determining whether or not school districts can mail ballots, is what my point is.
So I'll just let you know that our House Government Operations Committee, which governs elections, has a very keen interest in exactly this issue. And in my meetings with them, they are determined to take it up because yours wasn't the only district where this happened. ACSD, our budget did pass, but same thing. We had towns that did universal mailing and then towns that didn't. And the towns that did couldn't universally mail the ballot for the school district.
Right.
Because that would have been an unfair advantage over the other communities.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I want to take the time to thank you on behalf of our board for being here tonight.
Lori,
Yeah.
can I jump in
Yeah.
just for 1 second before you
Sure.
before you excuse us.
Yep.
I'd like to make sure you and certainly Jeannie knows this, but all your board members, if you want to testify in Montpelier today or anytime, it's really easy. Just watch our schedules on the legislative website, and you can do just what you're doing now. You don't have to come up here and waste 3 or 4 hours in a car to get here. Now, we would gladly take any testimony you have to offer on the screen. We are all set up for it. Every committee room is set up for it, and it's really easy. And we're trying to encourage public participation. So that's been one bright spot in this pandemic, is the transparency that the legislature now has. And thank you for allowing us to meet with you tonight.
Yeah, and we do need to steer these issues. I think it's really important for the committees of jurisdiction to understand what are the hands-on, what are the issues at home, and what are the problems. So it would be great if government operations or education or commerce could hear from you if there's a topic that you're interested in pursuing.
All right. Bill, you had a quick question?
Yes, comment is it's sometimes very hard to figure out the schedule and go through the various things on the website to see who is taking testimony on what issue or what have you, unless you have somebody informing you. So if you guys could figure out an easier or more convenient or approachable way to access this, I think a lot of people would appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Our agendas change on a sometimes minute by minute basis depending on availability of people.
Great. Well, again, I want to thank you on behalf of our board for taking the time to visit with us tonight, and we will definitely be in touch. So
thanks for the invitation.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I would like to do the presentation next, and we'll go back to the rest of the consent agenda items because I know we have people here and they don't need to be here that much longer. So, Kristen, if you would like to go ahead with your presentation, that would be great.
Sure. And we did receive the agenda from Melinda, and in deference to the weight of it, we tried to be as succinct as possible. That being said, you will have the presentation available right after today's meeting. I'll share it with Jean and Melinda, and we live this stuff, so we're happy to come back at any point and have these conversations with you. Everything that we're talking about today actually goes back to the legislative friends, falls within the umbrella of Act 173 in the legislation. So it's taking a look at our academic progress, specifically with our local measure Edmentum, and also social emotional learning, which is another part of the Act 173 pillar. So I'm going to introduce to you three of our fantastic coaches. Jimmy Kolb is our data literacy coach. He was previously an interventionist, an academic interventionist at OB. Susanna White is our equity and engagement coach. She works K-12. And Joni Wisdahl is our K-12 MTSS coach, multi-tiered system of support. So these three people live Act 173 and everything to do with this system. So I think you have the right to share your screen, Jimmy. Let's start with the Edmentum overview.
All right. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, and if someone would just give me I'm going to take under 10 minutes, and if someone, maybe Kristen or Joni, if you would give me a 5-minute warning, that would be great. In looking at the Edmentum data, I thought it made sense to really focus on 3 questions. The obvious question, how are students doing on these measures? Are the results reliable and valid? And then to kind of look at this through an equity lens. Edmentum, which is really nice, provides us multiple ways of looking at the data. So I'm going to talk about 3 tonight. One is how students do by percentile, and this is the data that you were provided for the board retreat. This image that you see on this slide is not is a representation of the general pattern that we look to see. So red would be the bottom 24th percentile and below, and so on up to blue, which would be the top 25 percentile. So we expect to see this green plus blue increasing throughout the year. So, and to put that in simpler terms, basically we want to see students scoring at or above the 50th percentile increasing. So, and then we see a reset at the beginning of, on the first diagnostic of the following year. And the reason for that is because the percentiles are determined based on how our students perform in relation to other students in the same grade around the nation. And so the comparison group is different each year. Third graders are being, at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year, last year, are being compared to third graders at the end of the year last year. And then once they hit fourth grade, they're suddenly being compared to fourth graders at the end of last year. So that's why we've got these boxes around that data in the items you were provided for the board retreat, because it's kind of two different comparisons. And I wanted to take the time to explain that because this expected trend is what we see for third through sixth graders in this district. It's less descriptive for secondary students, especially high school students. Another way that Edmentum gives us to look at how students are doing is average score or raw score. So students on both the math and math reading and language arts assessments can score somewhere between 500 and 1,500 points. As you can see, if you're looking just at this percentile comparison, it looks like we're doing a whole lot worse in the first diagnostic of this year than we did on the final diagnostic last year. And again, that's kind of a mirage because we've got two different comparison groups. You can see our average score it kind of looks pretty flat, really. There's a slight dip in the first assessment of this year, and this is looking just at elementary math. And that makes sense because our highest scores were presumably sixth graders and they have aged out into seventh grade. And we've got a new cohort of third graders coming in that are going to presumably score lower than the third graders at the end of the year last year, if that makes sense. But otherwise, this is just a snapshot over time of the average score. In red, we've got the lowest score, which very positive trend to see that going up to the student who scored the lowest. The lowest score is getting higher, basically. And then the top score is the highest score.
I don't understand the charts. Are we looking at the averages, average scores for each the red? Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Are we looking at the average scores of the lowest scorers would be in the red group otherwise?
No, the blue is the average. So this is an average min-max chart. So that blue is the average score of all students.
Okay.
Yellow is the individual single highest score available on this assessment, and red is the individual lowest score available on this assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And so I won't go through each of these one by one, but they each look a little bit different. We want to see all three of those lines going up ideally, right? Because we want to see the highest scores getting higher, the average score getting higher, and we want to see our lowest performing students doing better and better and better. So each one looks a little bit different, and I don't think we have the time to go through them. The last thing that I'll quickly speak about to speak to that first question of how are our students overall doing. At the end of the year, we want to see all of our students, or as many as possible, hit at or above the 50th percentile. So this shows that as of the most recent diagnostic in math, and this is for all students, so 3 through 10, 26% of our students have hit that 50th percentile or above. And in reading, it's at 29%. Now, bear in mind that that 50th percentile is an end of the year goal. So through the rest of the presentation, the reference point that I use is the 25th percentile and above. But if we have a chance to come back and present about this again at the end of the year, we'll use this as our reference point. So the second question is, how valid and reliable are our results? And this is a distribution of growth. So Edmentum tells us how students did from the first diagnostic to the second. So this is just from this year. And the only thing that I really want to point out on these two, this is for math and this is for reading, is that we really shouldn't see many or any scores in the negative. So unfortunately, we are seeing some students regressed from the first to second diagnostic. And there are a couple of reasons why that might be the case, but or why that could have happened. The good news is that the majority of the students did see growth from the first to the second diagnostic in both math and reading. So basically, we've got a large enough minority of students to be kind of concerned that the trends that we're seeing might be thrown off by some bad data. If perhaps a student didn't try as hard on the second diagnostic as the first, it would look like there was a regression when that might not actually be the case. But still, the positive takeaway is that the majority of students did see growth from the first to the second diagnostic. Another thing that can affect this is the completion rate. So the elementary school and the middle school are both doing pretty well, while they're but the high schoolers, the 9th and 10th graders who took this, there was a drop off by 13 percentage points from the first to the second diagnostic of participation in taking the tests. I imagine that I'm coming up on time, but the last piece of this is how we're doing in terms of equity. And so I have kind of math and reading for a comparison for 504 and IEP status. So that purple in the middle is all students who scored above the 24th percentile, or the 25th percentile and above. Blue is students not on a plan, orange is students on a plan. And I put this in this line to break up because again, last year and this year, because again, we expect to see a dip on the first diagnostic. So you can see that kind of there are some predictable disparities that occur. This is free and reduced lunch status with those on free and reduced lunch scoring below the average. And then here is ethnic origin. The only two groups that we have a large enough student body to really compare are Caucasian and African American. And as you can see, the Caucasian and all students scoring above the 24th percentile, the line is virtually the same, whereas African American students are performing a bit below. And so that was all for math, and then these are the three for reading. This one is 504 IEP status. This one is free and reduced lunch. And this one is ethnic origin. So we do see some closing of the gap in reading specifically at the middle and high school level. There are, some questions. I alluded to some possible causes of the growth, the surprising growth trends. Absenteeism could play a role, and lack of engagement might play a role. What we really need to see the third diagnostic assessment to clarify the trends or see if the trends change. This, as I think Christian mentioned, this presentation will be provided. There's a link to the data provided for the board retreat within this presentation, as well as a link to further disaggregated equity data.
Thank you, Jimmy, and that was 11 minutes. You did fantastically. I don't know if anyone has any quick questions for us about that. Again, we know that that was a very cursory sort of a way to present it, but we obviously have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do with our curriculum, and one of the things that we do, again, we sort of live this stuff, is we dig into the cohorts. We can't really present that level of specificity tonight in 20 minutes, but these are conversations that we're having. Yeah.
You can take questions if you want, or you can continue with your presentation. I'll leave it to you. Okay.
I just had one quick, probably easy question. How many kids do you know opt out of taking the exam?
So, Edmentum, they're not allowed to opt out. Edmentum is a local curriculum-based measure, but we know that you can loosely opt out by not showing up to school. To be honest, attendance is really, really tough for us this year. We're seeing truancy rates almost the same as they were last year because students have stuffy nose, students have a fever. Before it was tough it out and come to school, and now it's stay home. So we're having a really, really hard time, and that definitely skews the data. So Edmentum, you're not allowed to opt out, but there definitely are students who've missed the window, especially at Otter Valley. Things pick back up and they need to get back into whatever their courses were. So if they've missed it, they've missed it. At the elementary level, participation rates are much higher, but we have fewer students, and a classroom can kind of manage it in a different way. Sbac, which is the state assessment, we see pretty high percentages of students opting out. Traditionally, there are students who tend to score at the higher ranges of the assessment, which isn't helpful for us. But RNESU, OVU as a system this year needs to get to a participation rate of 95%, or we're in jeopardy of losing federal funding. So we're doing a pretty decent push.
Comment, he'd ask about how do you control for error. I'd ask Edmentum to provide you standard errors and using a vertically equated longitudinal kind of data. I can explain more of this later on, but you could get more data and you could avoid the use of adding and subtracting percentiles too, which is something that'd be good to do.
Absolutely, and I'd love to talk with you more about
Sure.
it. That'd be great, thank you.
Jimmy, that was admirably clear. Thank you. I'm not the greatest at reading these things, so that was very helpful. And I just wanted to reiterate, this is such an important topic. This is the kind of data we need to really be looking at closely, and I look forward to a much more extensive discussion on these things.
Thank you. All right, well, we're shifting gears to the social emotional side of things. Again, social emotional learning feels kind of like a buzzword. It's a trigger for folks, but it's just what schools have been doing for a really long time, and it is a state requirement in our plans and the MTSS system. Ladies, I'll share my screen. Does that work? Okay. Okay, so again, we're starting with the social emotional learning in RNESU.
Yeah, and I think I'm Susanna, by the way. I'm one of the coaches. And because of the buzzword nature of it, we wanted to make sure there's probably a range of familiarity amongst the board around what is SEL. So wanted to first anchor ourselves in, what's the meaning of social emotional learning, and then what's the importance of it. So on the next slide, there's a definition that comes from CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And they're really the driving force behind the research and policy that's related to SEL in schools. So the definition, SEL is the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. And that's, if you look at the diagram to the right, it's really at the classroom level, the school level, and the home and community level. And then when it gets to the why on the next slide, there we go. Like Kristen said, there are many reasons why we know SEL needs to be a major point of emphasis in our schools. We want all students to have opportunities to work on these skills every single year and graduate as proficient. And we know that these skills are transferable to their life beyond schooling, and are going to allow them to be successful both inside and beyond their school communities. And we know that teaching SEL is best practice, and in many ways is a way of more explicitly describing what we've always intended to isolate and refine. And finally, the AOE has named SEL as one of the 3 pillars of COVID recovery. So it's really a major focal point for us as we move through life in the pandemic.
Yeah, and I think, we definitely try to, as much as we're focused on curriculum and finding rigor in our programs, we also recognize that we want to find opportunities for students to find joy throughout the day. And so this is just pulled from the Thriving School Summit, 5 elements of thriving school communities, all related to social emotional learning, relationships, inclusivity, community, safety, and joy.
And then there are 5 core competencies that SEL instruction seeks to develop in students, each that has their own indicators. And I'll just introduce you briefly to them. I know we're really short on time, but it's important to note that not all students will come to school with the same level of skill in these areas. Just like adults, we don't all show up with the same levels of self-awareness, and we try to develop that as we go. So, the goal of SEL instruction is to meet all students where they are and then to develop their competencies over the course of each year at the Tier 1 level. So the first competency you'll see here is self-awareness, the ability to accurately recognize one's emotions and thoughts. And there's lots of different techniques and practices and strategies for this, and you can see some of those on the right. The next one is self-management, so the ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations, including, this is where impulses come in, managing stress, motivating oneself, and setting goals. Third is social awareness, so the ability to take the perspective of and empathize with others from diverse backgrounds and cultures, to understand social and ethical norms for behavior, and to recognize family, school, and community resources and supports. And relationship skills, the ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. So again, this really is about drawing out explicitly things that we've always valued in education and making sure we're really spelling out what the indicators are and making sure we're measuring them so we're meeting the needs of the students and developing those skills. And the last one is responsible decision-making, the ability to make constructive and respectful choices about personal behavior and social interactions based on consideration of ethical standards, safety concerns, social norms, the realistic evaluation of consequences of various actions, and the well-being of self and others.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joni Westall. So I'm going to talk about what social emotional learning looks like during the school day. Next slide. Thank you. So social emotional learning is embedded in our classroom practices and can be observed throughout the school day. Some examples on this slide include morning meetings. During morning meetings, a teacher could provide a greeting, an opportunity for students to share about their personal lives, and an activity to create a connection. A teacher could provide a prompt for students to engage with and model ways that students can gain self-awareness about their feelings and the feelings of others. During recess, students practice their self-management skills and are provided with feedback from teachers and staff about how to manage emotions and solve problems with their peers. And through small group activities and other cooperative learning structures, students practice and learn how to work and play with others. Next slide, please. Thank you. Beyond the classroom, for these examples, I highlighted some SEL opportunities and included some SEL performance indicators that reflect the standards from our upper grades. So some of our students engage in weekly lessons provided by their school counselors, and they can reflect on their values and interactions with their peers. Other students might seek out a school counselor for more support in finding learning opportunities or activities that align with their interests. During flex, advisory, and other lab models, our students practice goal setting, prioritizing, and applying strategies for growth mindset.
And just switching to Panorama, as one of the coaches mentioned earlier, SEL is now a requirement from the Vermont Agency of Education. It is one of the 3 pillars of COVID recovery. So we're required to submit a plan to the state. It's a rolling plan. I update it with my team fairly regularly. One of those pillars is social emotional learning. So each school district was tasked with finding a way to measure and evaluate social emotional learning, which for a lot of intents and purposes feels a little loose. So Panorama was the tool that we went with. And this is a little fuzzy, but again, this will be information that we pass to you afterwards, and we're happy to come back and dig into it. This kind of just shows you, so Panorama is a tool where at the early elementary level, teachers report out on how all of their students are doing. So teachers enter data based on measures along the lines of those 5 CASEL standards, so emotional regulation, self-efficacy, self-management, social awareness, and supportive relationships. At the upper elementary, middle, and high school, students take this survey themselves, so they self-report out on how they think they're doing. Interestingly enough, our students at the elementary level, K to 6, scored almost identically to our students at the 7-12 level. And this is in the fall benchmark and also the winter benchmark. So you can see, as in SU, we are really struggling the most with emotional regulation for our student population, and really self-efficacy. We are doing really well with supportive relationships. So if you look at self-efficacy, it's that belief that students have that they can be successful with something. If I have a challenging task, I can persevere with this, right? A teacher will help you be able to do that. So it asks students several questions, and it asks teachers those sort of questions as well. And you can see overall our average across the SU is 40%. That's a decrease in 12%, right? So that's pretty concerning to us, that our students really are feeling like they can't be successful during the course of the school day or with their work. At the elementary level, the flip side of that is though 86% of our students feel that they have supportive relationships in school, that they have teachers that they have meaningful connections to, that if they're struggling with someone, they have an adult that they can turn to solve that. At, again, the upper elementary through high school level, the scores are almost identical. Emotion regulation comes in as a concern, but so does self-efficacy. And a highlight, again, although it's not as high as elementary, supportive relationships came in at 77% of our students felt that they had someone that they can go to. What's interesting about those data points is the one has the potential to significantly impact or improve the other, right? With meaningful adult connections, they have the ability to help students grow in self-efficacy or their belief that they can and will be successful. So, how we provide.
Thank you. So through our multi-tiered systems of support, we can use our data to guide decision-making and problem-solving. We analyze our student data at the district, school, and classroom level to determine which students may require additional support throughout the school year. Through data review at the school level, teams can make instructional decisions as well as provide more intensive support or intervention. MTSS teams ask these guiding questions to determine the effectiveness of the support they're providing to students. Through data review, teams determine whether they have been effective or whether we need to scale back or intensify support. So the best approaches to SEL involve explicit instruction, like through our morning meetings. SEL should be embedded within our academics and instructional practices. during extracurricular activities and opportunities we provide for students. Developing adult SEL capacity has been very important this year. It's important for our teachers to understand and practice SEL skills in their daily lives in order to meet students' needs. Some examples of this include labeling emotions, building positive relationships, and practicing self-care. In terms of professional learning this year, our teachers belong to professional learning communities, or PLCs, which can be in the form of grade level clusters, grade teams, or departments. And our teachers are engaging in conversations around how to build positive relationships with students and maintain communication with families. Classroom teachers and school counselors collaborate to set goals for students and discuss student progress. Having PLCs has really led to coaching opportunities as well as targeted learning sessions in our schools around social emotional learning and just how we can support students in our schools.
Questions? Evan?
Just by glancing at some of the charts, some of the techniques used struck me as things, for instance, squeezing a ball or something, struck me as things might work very well with younger kids, but I don't see them working with high schoolers very well, and I wondered how you, I know you've thought of this, and I know there's way more detail than, but just in general, do you tailor these approaches differently for high schoolers, and how would that be?
I can take that and jump in, Joni and Kristen, if you want to add anything. But absolutely, Kevin. I think there's these indicators, right? And we need to make sure that the strategies that we use are developmentally responsive. So what works for helping students label their emotions in kindergarten is quite different than what a senior in high school is able to do. And so there are so many different strategies. And I take your point that I think the ones that we listed probably are more targeted to elementary. And I think one of the things that we are going to focus on doing more is working with teachers and figuring out how can you also embed this learning into academic instruction, because I think at the high school level in particular, that's where a lot of the richness can come out and the nuance in that learning. I don't know if that answers your question, but
No,
I
that's
just want to validate
a fine start of a complex answer. I guess I would add, and this isn't a question that I think our kids collectively are hurting from COVID more than we probably realized a year ago, and they need help in a lot of these areas, I think.
Anyone else have questions? Okay. Well, I thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you, Susanna, Joni, and James. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll see you again very soon, probably at a second meeting before the end
I
of
will
the week.
send the reports to Jean.
Yeah,
Great.
great, get them out.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night. Okay, so we are going to move back to the two items on the consent agenda that we had not dealt with. The next one was official newspaper. Want to make a motion?
Yeah, I want to make a motion that we designate the Rutland Herald be the official newspaper.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. And since you brought it up,
Yeah, so my thought process behind this is I read the Rutland Herald every day, online and so forth. The only time I tend to go to the reporter is when I get a phone call saying, oh, did you read this article? Or, oh, did you catch that? Or, oh, your kid's in there. Did you happen to see it? That's the only time I go to the Brandon Reporter. Or if I'm standing in line at a grocery store or something, I happen to flip through the pages.
okay? Other, Jean?
I'd go with board members first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bill?
You can have more than one designated official newspaper, and I would suggest that.
Okay. Derek, did you have your hand raised?
No, I support Bill's comment.
I'd be fine with 2 as well.
Okay. Everyone else nodding their head. Did you want to speak, Jean?
I did want to add something. Yes, I think you have to designate one, but the way it's always been done here is we designate the reporter, but we use the Rutland Herald to make sure that we're sharing all information. The Rutland Herald's not going to cover us any more than they cover us now, but they list all of our events. We're part of everything that they're doing. We automatically send it to the Herald as well as the reporter. I would, when we talk about the budget revote, designating the Brandon reporter may be very helpful to that discussion because of how they're willing to partner with us on getting the word out to the community. But to do it, so if you don't want to designate the reporter, could I at least ask you to wait until after that discussion to decide that? Or go with the reporter and also designate the Rutland Herald as Bill
For
said.
official notices.
For all official notices.
Can we make one note too that I think it's referred to as the reporter, not the
The
Brandon
reporter,
reporter.
thank you.
So are you amending your motion to include the reporter as both? 'Cause-
Yeah, I will amend it to include both.
And are you okay with that
Sure.
since you seconded it? Okay. Any other, and we can do that, you're okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. Any other discussion related to that?
We usually do that, actually.
Okay, so all in favor of the motion, which is to designate the Rutland Herald and the Brandon Reporter as our official newspapers, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. All right, the next one is regular meeting date and time location, and I realized I pulled this off, but I'm gonna ask someone to make the motion. Actually, I guess I need to make the motion. So, I'm going to make a motion that we, change the meeting day from Wednesday to Thursday, and I'll explain more when, we get into that. And if someone would be willing to second it so we can talk about it.
I will second it.
Thank you.
Do you want to start? Can I say something?
I would love to start if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay, thanks. So, as you all know, we have a new superintendent
Coming in,
coming in.
not yet.
Oh, well, yeah, well, okay, true. So, all right. Anyway, so.
You can leave now, Jean.
See ya.
You've been removed.
See ya.
So, in talking with her, she has lots of commitments on Wednesday nights, potentially. And we were wondering if the board would consider a Tuesday or a Thursday. I'm pretty sure that there were a couple of people who had issues with Tuesday nights, so that's why I suggested Thursday. However, if that is a problem, like I spoke with Kristen earlier, we are usually pretty amenable that if something comes up, that we will move the date to accommodate because family comes first. So that's all I wanted to say.
My issue is Thursdays I cannot do,
Okay?
at least in, I'd say, 8 months out of the year.
Okay? Yes.
If such a move was made, what would the status be of the online participation segment?
Oh, I think we'd keep that as long as, there's no reason for us not to keep that.
Okay, then I would be okay with that.
Okay?
Tuesdays work.
Tuesdays would work for me. yeah.
Natalie's hand is
All right, Natalie, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have another commitment at the first Thursday of every month at the same time.
Okay,
So I have a conflict.
all right. Anyone
Oh.
else?
That reminds me, I have a conflict on Tuesdays, once a month.
On either the first or third?
No, actually, those should be okay.
Okay. Barbara?
I mean, I'm just weighing in as far as Tuesdays. I would not be able to do Tuesdays
Okay.
ever. Sorry.
All right, so just a quick show of hands, who cannot do Tuesdays? Just Barbara? Okay, and who cannot do Thursdays?
ever.
Just Mike. Okay. And Natalie, sorry. Okay. So
You also could do it month by month.
we could. So at this point, do you want to maintain Wednesdays and then knowing that if your schedule needs to accommodate a move, that you just ask us and we probably can make that happen? Are you okay with that for now? So, and is everybody else amenable to that as well? Okay, so, then, we'll vote on my
Could-
motion. Yeah?
I mean, will there be advanced notice of that?
Yes, I believe that, the
It's not
things
gonna
that.
be like, oh, next week, we're moving the meeting to.
No, I would assume that you'd have like a month.
Okay.
Or
No,
so.
I'm
But you know
totally
as
fine
well
with
as
that.
I do that once in a while something comes
Yeah,
up.
absolutely.
And, you may not have that kind of notice, so. Okay,
Yeah,
so,
you've done that for me, like, I'll bring to you recommendations at the August retreat, especially when my daughter was playing soccer. For those of you who are on the board, and I said, I need to be at a soccer game, and
Right.
or I needed to be at a conference, and you've adjusted, but it's, as much as possible, it's planned out in advance, you just kind of look at the dates, and then Kristen can identify what she knows she cannot do, and then you'll look at those months.
okay, so you're okay with that? Okay. So, all of those in favor of my motion, which is to turn the meetings to Thursdays, signify by saying aye. All of those opposed?
Nay.
I think the nays have it. Okay, sticking with Wednesdays. Thank you for that. All right, so that moves us on. We did that one. Our next one is the effective governance training debrief. I'm going to take your suggestion, Eric, and we are going to move the board monitoring report to our next meeting, if that's okay with everyone. Okay. And then before we go into the debrief, I think it's important that we talk about our OV budget. So if everybody's okay with moving to that, all right, then we are going to move to that. So, as you know, our budget failed. Normally we have about 3,000 votes. We had less than 1,000 votes counted toward our budget. And as Jean alluded to, I think we can suffice it to say that a lot of people didn't realize they hadn't voted for the budget because they had been mailed a ballot and they didn't realize the school budget wasn't in there. So, we have a couple of options. Do you want to explain options or do you want me to explain options? You might know them better.
I don't know if I can read your mind. I can tell you what's ahead of us, yeah.
All right, well, that's what I mean.
All right.
Okay.
So, just so you understand timelines, you don't have a budget and you have 3 vacant board seats. If you want to do both of those things, the board seats will significantly delay your vote. If you're going after the board candidates in your vote, it's going to take at least 50 days, and that only gives candidates 2 weeks to get a petition signed. So I don't recommend that you pursue that. I just think you want to go out for a vote a whole lot sooner than 50 days from now. But if you're focusing just on the budget, then I would recommend that you focus on, I don't know if that's Brenda giving me, no. I don't know if, I would recommend that you do a public forum to get more a virtual public forum to get more information perhaps on if people want to show up and say why they voted no or why they didn't vote. If you'd like, I can open up a thought exchange and let's talk as well so we could gather information electronically if you'd like. And then you meet and decide what budget you want to go out with. You can go out with the same budget, that is allowed. You don't have to, that's up to you. The earliest date that I would anticipate you could set if you did both those things is probably April 12th, if I went with a Tuesday. Or I would not do during vacation week, I would not recommend it. So April 12th or April 26th, or the week of April 12th or the week of April 26th, if you want to pick a different day. Once you pick your date, you'll have to do public notice no less than 10 days before, and you'll have to do the information meeting no less than 5 days before. So once you pick your date, so in other words, if you pick the April 26th week, you're actually doing your informational meeting in the middle of a school break, which also could be a problem because you can't back it up further. And the reporter, thank you, Mike. The reporter is offering to kind of partner with getting the word out with this. So there are some things that we can do for example, we can put our warning right in the reporter. We can, they would be happy to write some articles to make sure that people are really aware of what's going on. You can write some articles, you can solicit letters to the editor. We can put the, what we actually have to, the warning, we can actually put it in the public reporter, or the reporter, and then it is public and it doesn't have to be mailed. The one other thing that I would say is, if you wanted to do a mailing to everybody of the ballots, just like the first time, all 6 select boards would have to agree to that. And that will delay everything by at least a month because all 6 select boards have to meet to agree to that. So I think my recommendation is you go for the vote as soon as you can, that you do it in person, that you focus just on the budget, that you hold virtual meetings because the in-person netted 1 person.
The one thing you missed, I think,
you.
is the fact that, the Brandon reporter would partner with us and everyone in our school districts would get a reporter. So it's not like you'd still have to go pick up the reporter at a store. You would actually,
Right,
they would be mailed
By
to
putting
everyone.
by putting the ballot warning in the reporter, we could, that could fund the reporter so that they are willing to mail it to every single person. So that would be helpful as well.
Then you might read it, Mike.
I read it just when it's in front of me.
He'll read this one.
I think it's kind of a, with the dates, it's a double-edged sword. You know, you have 3 weeks.
I think April 12th is too soon.
I think April 26th, we're having an information meeting during the break.
Well, what if
So
we went the next week out? I mean, there's nothing saying that it has to be done in April.
Oh, that's, I would agree with.
Okay.
If it was the next week out, because,
And if you didn't pass, you're gonna have to do it again before June 30th. So that's the other piece I didn't say.
yeah,
By
I
June
mean, that's
30th,
why I
you
say
revert
it's,
to
I
the
mean,
last
it's
budget.
such a double-edged sword as to too soon, break, too late.
Mm-hmm.
No, triple-edged sword, no.
What does everyone else think? Yeah, Greg?
I don't know if I'm reluctant to say this or not, but I feel like a lot of votes, obviously, we can kind of always guess at why it passed or didn't pass, but I just feel like there's never been a vote as clear of why it went the way it did as this one. That I think it's fine, we should always try and be out in the public and do a public forum. I just don't know how, you know, if we're gonna learn something new, I hate saying that, but, you know, I feel like that vote didn't happen. Like, I just feel like it didn't happen. Like 3,000 to 900, that's,
It's huge.
not to, I mean, I voted, so I did it, but, you know what I'm trying to say, so I just feel like my inclination is to keep the budget the way it is. I also think, and this is I think the reporter does a great job, but like the article title was like 7.5% increase
Right,
in budget, but in the title, but it, you know, if the title had been 7.5 increase in budget, but taxes remain relatively the same, that could have been a title that would give all the information. You know, you had to read it to kind of find that out. So
Yeah,
I don't know if that title.
We should write our own headlines.
And this is no, I don't, you're the reporter, right? Yeah, I'm not saying, you know, how they should write an article. I'm just saying if there are people who read that, and then they didn't read the article, you know, did they not get the information about what, because ultimately, what do they care about? Is their taxes probably, a lot of people at least, but.
Okay. So Brenda, I love you to pieces, but I'm gonna listen to board members first, then I'll come back to you. Is that okay? Okay, Natalie.
I get what Greg's trying to say, and I feel like we need to target families who have kids in school. Can we send an email out to families that say, hey, give them, you know, constant reminders, the budget's coming, the vote for the budget's coming up. We just really need to market it to those people more. Can we post on Facebook? What can we do to get the word out better than we did this time around? And I don't think that we need to change the budget. I think that the numbers just weren't there, and that's why we didn't get the vote.
You can do everything. You can do everything you said. You just cannot tell people how to vote.
Okay.
But you can use you can tell them to vote. You can use social media. We can use the robocalls. We can use newsletters.
Your
What?
newsletter, your weekly
My newsletter.
Can we target
Yeah.
people like parents as opposed to voters overall, though? That strikes me as.
Sure you can.
If
You
you-
can partner with the PTOs who are gonna, yeah. You're not ignoring the other voters, but if you want to send, you have
It's
a,
just
you have a more
marketing, right? We're
captive
just-
audience with
Yeah, you're
parents.
just, you're just getting the word
We're
out.
still doing it in the reporter. We're still doing it in the other places that other people see, but we're getting the outreach out to more people.
Right.
Who don't normally read the reporter. Because let's be honest, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds aren't reading the reporter. And they're probably not, they don't have online subscriptions. They're looking at Facebook and Instagram and everything else. So we
Anybody
need
wanna make a
to
TikTok?
use the right marketing tools for the audience that we want to target.
Barbara was next, sorry.
No, that's
And
fine,
then,
I understand. I
Barbara was
asked in the
next.
pecking order.
Yep.
I think everything that Natalie said is a great idea, and the only thing I was going to say is sort of just a slight different direction, was that we don't know why people didn't show up at the meeting to tell us what problem they had with the budget. So I agree that I think it's just that people didn't turn up. It's not that people had some specific axe to grind about this budget. So I agree with keep it what it is, and we'll do a better job of getting out the vote.
Okay, and a couple of things I need to tell you. April 12th is actually 4 weeks away from today. And the info meeting can be the night before, so we could do April 26th.
That was what
So,
Brenda was
yeah.
trying to tell us.
Okay, so Brenda, do you still want to talk to us? No? Maybe?
She does.
Yes, am I allowed to?
Maybe. Okay, go ahead.
The only other thing I wanted to tell you, in order to not have untimely property tax bills, it will be in our best interest to have a passed budget by May 1st. So by May 1st, we want a passed budget, because we will then notify, then we have 30 days until that budget report is required to be sent to the Agency of Education for them to do their magic to work with property valuation and review to get a vote, or
Okay.
to get property tax bills. So I just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Mike?
So, I agree 100%. We should present the same budget,
Okay.
but I have a but.
Oh,
We're at a time where we have significantly rising gas prices, rising interest rates. There's a good number of people who came out to vote no. There's a good number of people who did not come out to vote yes. What's to say that's gonna happen again? I think we should make some sort of effort to say, even if it's reducing it by a small amount, but my fear is, with inflation and everything they have going on right now, who knows where we're gonna be?
so Brenda, and I'll get to you in just a minute, Kevin. Brenda, what amount of money would we have to reduce the budget by to even remotely affect the tax rate? Like by a penny?
So what's a penny on the tax rate?
Oh, a lot. I'll look it up, but I think it's about $250,000.
Yeah, so I don't know that makes any sense. If we have to cut
I'll check it out and
$250,000
text you.
to reduce the tax
I
rate. by a penny.
But
agree. That's the only reason I asked that
But
question.
I just wanna throw it out there, it's
Yep.
something we should be considering at the same time.
Okay. Kevin, you were next.
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Mike said. Thanks to the select boards, probably. We don't really know, but we're in a bind now because I think traditionally in Vermont, no voters are more motivated than yes voters, especially on special elections. And as Mike pointed out, we've had inflationary pressures explode in the last few months. The turnout for special elections tends to be low. We're taking our chances. I think the voters overall are in a generous mood this year in November, in March, which is, it's kind of too bad we missed out. But we have to be cautious, and we have to present a case this time that we perhaps didn't do. I'd like to know why people voted no, or people didn't show up. If the answer is, well, I didn't see the ballot, I was confused, I'd happy to vote yes. That's a different story than I'm angry at the schools for whatever reason. but it will behoove us to try to find out as much as possible, and we really have to sell the budget this time, because we're gonna be trying to convince people to show up, especially at a time they wouldn't normally do so.
Becky?
I just want to point out at our policy governance training where we want, our priority is our students and grades, and when what is our North Star? And if that's our North Star is to, improve where kids are in their learning, then I think we need to do a better job of selling our budget and not cutting it to take things away from kids, personally.
Okay, so Brenda got back to us. A penny on the rate, on the tax rate, is $165,000. So, my inclination in talking with lots of people that I've seen, because I've seen a lot of people lately, and I've gotten a lot of their input, is that a lot of them didn't realize they hadn't voted. I haven't met one person who said to me, I voted that budget down and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. That has not happened. And you do have a group of people that will do that. It doesn't matter what your budget is. So, my inclination is to send out the budget again the way it is. Yes, Bill?
Statute says you have to put in a revised budget for this.
Not the current statute.
It changed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Erase that.
Okay. Okay. So, and I think that because people will realize now that they didn't vote, that they're looking for that budget vote, and that they will make sure that they do that. And that taxes are down 5.5 cents from last year, or they will be. If
we could write it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could.
And it was buried in the article. It was
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
One other question.
Yes.
And Brenda, do you know if the governor is going to be putting that $50,000 into
50 million.
50 million.
50
He's not
million?
giving it to you.
I would just a few.
You have a problem with big numbers too, just like Brenda, huh?
Yeah, too many zeros.
I have a problem with little numbers.
Oh,
not the
right,
big
right.
ones.
Sorry. Okay.
He's not talking like he's going to give it to the schools, no.
But the what is it? A yield is significantly up though from last year. So that's
Another thing. That's the anticipated yield. Another reason to get out by May 1st and do this budget, because we don't know what's going to happen to the yield. We don't know what's going to happen to the 90 million. It could be better. It could be worse.
Well, in listening to all of you, my inclination is that I would accept a motion if someone wanted to make it that we send the budget out the way it is with an April 26th vote, with a virtual meeting the night before on the 25th. And that we no, I think we're doing virtual. Didn't we say
I meant the
virtual?
vote.
Oh yeah, the vote has to be. And that we use the reporter's assistance to make sure that happens. And
Do you
get
want
the word
to,
out.
okay, that's your vote. You can then
Well, I
decide
just need someone to make the
strategy.
motion. Yeah.
moved.
So moved.
I
Second?
moved that, but I'd also add that we use other avenues as well.
Oh yeah, we will.
Like
Yeah,
Facebook and email.
absolutely. Yep. And we will. Okay, so we have a second? Okay. So, any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion of setting the budget out again, unchanged with an April 26th vote date with a forum the night before virtually, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Perfect. It is past 8 o'clock. We do have to have an executive session. So I would entertain a motion to extend the meeting.
Do you want to do anything about your board vacant? Oh, extend the
Well,
meeting.
yeah, we're gonna extend the meeting. I was hoping to extend the meeting like a half an hour, if that's okay.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Okay. Thank you for allowing us to do that.
Got one opposed.
Yep.
Oh. All right. So let's talk about board vacancies. So, normally when we have board vacancies, we ask that we solicit people's interest. We probably would put that in the reporter too, when it goes out looking for board members. And then we would fill the vacancy for a year, then they would have to go out and get the seat themselves. And since two of these director positions are only for 1 year of remaining for a 3-year term, that's probably not such a bad idea. And I do know that there was someone who ran for the Pittsford seat. I don't know if she's still interested. She just didn't win the seat. So if she is still interested, but the question is, do you guys want us to solicit interest for these seats so that we can elect someone? Or it's not elect, it's appoint. Thank you. For the year. And in March, they would have to run again.
What's the alternative? I'm confused.
So the alternative is that the seat remains vacant. And then that means that 7 of us have to show up at a meeting and only 3 of you can not be here.
We could appoint sometime later if a person came along.
Sure, yep, but it would only be till March.
Whoever's appointed has to run again in March.
Right, has to run again in March.
Next March, yeah.
Yeah. So it's your pleasure.
I have a feeling it's gonna be a rather recurring problem as the years continue to go by. So we may have to start a precedent now where they, even though I hate the idea of, hey, you didn't wanna do it now, hey, you wanna try again? I hate that idea, but, because I was opposed to it last year.
Right.
For the same spot, I think.
Thank you so much, Padra, for being here.
Thanks, Patrick.
Well, like I said, so, and I do know that someone from Pittsford did try to do a write-in, so.
Do you know if they tried, or did somebody write them in? Like, Bill didn't try very hard. And
that's true.
He's in his second term.
I did see a post on Facebook that.
I tried.
Yeah.
For the person.
Yeah. So, right. And
I did too late. It was like the day before, so.
But they were interested. Well,
and
I spoke to him the day.
And do you remember that the Goshen seat stayed vacant for like 2 or 3 years before Bill so graciously got voted in?
He doesn't have to get as many write-ins, though.
That's well. So
need
Lester
one.
doesn't either. Pittsford needs a few more, and then Brandon needs more.
60?
I think Brandon's 60.
for-
I think Lothrop's less.
For
than
write-in,
that.
it's a little bit
For
different.
write-in.
Yeah.
Write-in, I thought it was a smaller percentage.
For write-in,
I think it's a percentage of the total number of voters.
It's
Sorry.
actually for an at-large position, it is 60 votes.
I see
Okay.
the bar still.
So that's
We'll
part of
check
it.
for you, because I think it's different for write-in.
Well, that was actually for
That's
the
a
Pittsburgh
petition.
position, though.
Might have been. So anyway, so there's that. So are you okay with us sending, putting something in the reporter and asking people if they want to join our board?
Yeah.
Okay.
We
I think we can try.
can try, and
Okay.
Not making any
goes-
promises, but sure.
Yeah.
if it goes vacant another cycle here, we'll keep working on trying to get some interest.
Okay. All right. Then that's what we'll do. I don't think we need to have a vote. We're all in consensus.
Okay.
So we're going to by consensus, we are going to put out to the voters that we are looking for 3 board members and solicit their interest.
Are we?
Letters of
Are you
interest.
able to do write-ins on the budget?
No, because
Not doing votes?
if we did that, as Jean indicated, we would have to wait 50 days,
Oh.
and that puts us way too.
I didn't know if that counted
Yeah.
for write-ins.
I thought it was 50
Yeah,
days
if
to
you
get the
put-
name on the
If you put the candidates, if you want to put that on your ballot, you'll have to wait 50 days. So
Oh,
there's no
okay.
write-in unless there's a question on the ballot.
Okay.
So if you want the
Okay,
question
I
on
see
the
what you're
ballot.
saying, yep.
Oh, the
Yeah.
question, not the person's
Right.
name. Is 50.
If you want the question, you have to wait 50 days because there's processes that have to happen for that.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that's what we're doing. RNESU board update. So as you all know, we have extended the position of superintendent to Kristen Hubert.
Who just left.
Who just left. We will not be hiring an associate superintendent next year, as was the plan in the budget, because in talking with Kristen, she would like a director of curriculum and instruction and assessment for the first year at least, because she's going to be learning the superintendency, and she wants that director of curriculum to be fully embedded in the curriculum here, because we need to be doing that. So.
Somebody in mind?
That's her purview, so, but I do know that she's had a lot of interest already in that position, so. Okay? Other than that, there really are no other board updates from the RNESU at this point. We will meet next week.
Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Some new people, yeah.
Yes, so, at 6 o'clock at central
Virtual.
office.
Virtual.
Or virtual, that's right, we are virtual.
Because I'm virtual.
Virtual that night, okay? All right. Superintendent's report.
Gosh, I was really focused on the elections debrief and annual meeting. We have not yet chosen an Otter Valley associate principal. We held 3 more interviews this week. We're having discussions with Michael Ruppel, the incoming principal, and Christine Everts, the existing associate principal, and Kristen as the incoming superintendent, and me. We're considering maybe restructuring that model and bringing somebody who's new to administration in a slightly different model, where Michael might be the instructional leader 712, and the person coming in focuses more on culture and climate. We think we might have some
Interest that way?
some more. We think that with some of the folks that we've interviewed, that's a better way to start. So those discussions are underway. And then tonight on consent agenda, I think it was tonight, was Brian Crane for Otter Creek Academy.
So was Michael Ruppel, actually.
He was on tonight?
Yep.
Wow, I've been working him hard.
I know, right? Before he even got hired. All
And
right.
he's been granting us quite a bit of time, I have to tell you. Michael is going to hit the ground running. He is very.
What are they gonna do in Springfield, fire him?
I don't, exactly. No, he's doing a lot of it virtually, but he's attending all these interviews. He's reaching out to candidates. I'm really impressed with how he's starting off.
That's great. Okay, so our next meeting date is Wednesday, April 6th, here or online. And we should talk about the April 20th date, that is during vacation. How many people have a conflict for that week or are going away? Okay,
What's the date?
April 20th, it's the week of vacation,
26?
20th.
20th?
I just need to know who has
I
a,
don't have a conflict.
all right, anybody else have a conflict?
I do, but I can be here virtually.
Okay, so the question is, do we want to move the meeting? It sounds like we don't, there's only 1 or 2 conflicts maybe, but, and we can talk about it again in 2 weeks. So right now, do we want to leave it alone and talk about it again on April 6th?
I say yes.
Yes? All right. Okay, we are also going to move the training debrief, to next meeting, just because of the issuance of time. And so at this point, I would be willing to entertain a motion to go into executive session for blah, blah, blah,
Negotiations?
Yeah, negotiations and a
I'll
student
make,
discipline.
I'll make the motion, but we also have to invite Lisa in as well, correct?
Yep.
So I'll make.
Yeah,
a
I
motion.
can
Bring
text her.
in Lisa and me.
Are you doing
Yes.
both topics in one executive session? Or don't you have
No,
to
I'll
come
try to
out?
take notes to come out and go in. The student issue one is now gonna be very brief, thank goodness, so.
Okay.
I do not expect action on either one. Neither one is needing action tonight.
But you'll go in and out with the negotiations first?
Yes.
Okay. Who seconded?
Nobody did
second.
yet.
So I guess I'll have to take the computer with me, but we'll go in the next room so that you guys can take down and,
I'll get Lisa on the.
thank you.
Did the motion ever pass?
Consent agenda.
Oh, good question.
Oh, good question.
We didn't
Oh,
vote on
yeah,
it.
sorry,
Sorry to chime in.
all of those in favor of going into executive session at 8:21 signify by saying aye.
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 It's
There we go.
difficult